Western Newcastle, a place that many would describe as a lost city, a ghost town, a mere remnant of the industrial age of old.
But it was in these rat alleys that some of the most infamous murders in British history would take place. But what was so unbelievably shocking about these crimes is they were not committed by your everyday lowlives, they were committed by children. Do you think she deserved to be tried as an adult?
Yes. I mean, she was a murderer.
And you think that the decision to have her released after only a few years was the right one?
Absolutely not. In no reality should you be released for murdering someone. Like, unless it was completely accidental, like, not really directly your fault, you shouldn't be released for murder no matter the age. Like, how old? She was 11, wasn't she?
10, 11.
10, 11. Like, you have a concept of what death and, like, murder is by that age. There's no excuse.
Mary Bell was always described as being, for lack of a better term, too clever. She never quite fit in with the other kids, always off on her own. Strange, yes, however when you look at her past it begins to make a lot more sense. She was born in 1957 to one Betty McCricket. She never knew her real father, and I'm sure Betty didn't know either, on account of the fact she was well known for being a prostitute. And thus Mary was already in with an unsavoury crowd even from birth. In accordance with her line of work, Betty wasn't around a lot, so Mary was mostly raised by her stepfather, one William Bell. In fact, for the longest time, Mary believed him to be her real father. However, this relationship was far from a healthy one, with Billy habitually abusing Mary when she was young.
This aside, nobody could have predicted what Bella would be capable of, as on the 25th of May 1968, she would kill young Martin Brown with strangulation. He was just 4 years old.
However, at the time, the police didn't suspect foul play, simply believing it to have been a nasty accident as he was found in an abandoned house lying next to an empty bottle of pills. This, combined with the fact that forensic science was since infancy at the time, convinced everyone that this was just an unfortunate accident, a tragic consequence of dangerous play.
You see, at the time, children were often left to play completely unsupervised. Combine that with the fact that much of the local housing was being demolished to make room for modern high-rise blocks, it's really no surprise that many of the local population were outraged by this death, as it was blamed on all the shoddy demolition work. Many took to the streets to protest this work, and at the front of it all was young Mary. Sometime between the two murders, Mary Bell and her friend Norma Bell, of no relation, broke into a nursery, leaving notes boasting about the crime. However, police dismissed this as a mere prank rather than something more sinister.
At this point, it's worth talking about the aforementioned Norma Bell. She was mostly described as being simple-minded, which I suppose is a polite way of saying she was as dense as a grease-cut diamond. With many saying that if Mary told her to jump off the Tyne Bridge, she would have hit the water before she could even finish her sentence, despite the fact she was nearly 3 years older than Mary.
However, the fun and games wouldn't last long though, as on the 31st of July, just over 2 months after the first killings, young Brian Howe would be found dead on a local dust heap known as the Tin Lizzie. He had been strangled, stabbed and mutilated. It was at this point the police finally caught on and realised they had a serial killer on their hands. And so here, in Newcastle Assizes, on the 17th of December 1968, Mary and Norma Bell were trialled.
Well, not really, because even though what she did was really, like, bad, she was only, like, young. I think she was 10 or 11, yeah. And because at that age, you do sort of know what you're doing, but at the same time, you're not really going to understand, like, the impact of, like, you know, death and what it's going to do to people, really.
While these events were indeed tragic, that's not all they were. Many cite these incidents as a turning point in British history, going from the tight-knit Victorian communities of the earliest 20th century to the antisocial behaviour and stabbings and robberies of the high-rise blocks and council flats. Mary and Norma Bell were but the first in a long line of corrupted youths. But I suppose that's a story for another day.
I hate kids.